You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another interesting episode of Ask a Drone U. Joining me today, as always, Bald-Headed Bureau. Welcome, Rob. How are you?
I am fantastic.
Good.
Super glad to be here and so thankful for the folks that are out there listening in and hoping that we give them some nuggets they can take and make their lives better with. So let us know what your questions are so we can do even just a little bit to help you. AskADroneU.com.
By the way, before we get into today's question, which is kind of regarding some flight over water settings to avoid disaster, it is a good opportunity and reminder that if you are looking to really one-up the drone game when it comes to subject tracking, when it comes to flying over water, whether that's wake surfing or wakeboarding or surfing as a whole, you know, if you want to fly closer, you want to fly lower, get the shots and keep the jobs, highly recommend that you check out the Props Pilot program. If you go to propsflightschool.com or props.thedroneu.com and check that out. It's a sequential training to help pilots face various problems and issues that arise in different environments of flight. And one of those that's gone over in depth is exactly what we're about to talk about today. So if you like that sequential chronological training where you like the structure, you're like me, you're a little ADD and you need a little structure to succeed, that's what Props was built for. Drone U, as I have said, is built for pilots and Props is built for teams, but Props is always built for those who like to get serious and like to speed up their learning curve. So check it out, props.thedroneu.com.
Hi guys, Derek here from Ohio again. My question today was regarding flying over water, more specifically filming wakeboarding on a lake. My relatives enjoy wakeboarding and I filmed them once before. While it wasn't a major fail, the footage was just not that good. And I had more issues than you can shake a stick at. So yeah, I'm just looking for some tips, some settings I should have on my drone to prevent an accident or, to keep my drone from sinking to the bottom of the lake. I know Paul does. He films wake surfing, and I'm sure he has a lot of great knowledge from doing that. So, yeah, anything on this would be awesome. Thanks, guys, for the great show.
Thank you, Derek. We were talking about this before the show, and I don't know that we have much to offer you, frankly, because, sorry.
Goodbye. Just kidding.
No, this could
gotcha, though. Everyone who's like, oh, there's the real Paul. I'm just kidding.
No, this could not be more in Paul's wheelhouse. It's funny because there's settings and there's all the tips and so forth that you have, but that you'll have. And there's our class, by the way, that you definitely are going to have to dig into, frankly. And Paul can talk a little bit more about that and what's in it. But it makes me think, you got to think outside the box. Who knew, and I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but it happened. A lot of people have seen it. Who knew that when the wake surfer threw the rope,
that it would get the drone.
It would get the drone. And just not something that you thought about.
Twice.
Right? Yeah. And you had done it a lot already.
That's the negatives of flying low and close.
Well, it is, but it also is okay, what direction will you throw the rope? So the point is, you got to, just like talking to a client, well, maybe the wake surfer or the wakeboarder is your client, but you got to talk to them in as much detail as you can to kind of understand the circumstance, right?
Well, and that brings up actually a very important point that I hadn't thought about. You've got to have trust with the rider. You have to have trust with the rider, because if the rider freaks out and you're flying in some sort of close proximity, things can go bad very fast, which also brings up something extremely critical. And I was even watching the Olympics and some of the drone footage, and I was like, ugh! But you could tell someone was flying in GPS mode or position mode, because as soon as they let off the sticks, boom, that camera came to a halt, a stop, and it was It was very recognizable, maybe not to the layman, but definitely to us drone pilots, which actually brings up a point. I would love to hear everyone's feedback about the coverage regarding the Olympics this year. I don't know. Have you been watching it at all? Because we have been trying to watch some parts, and I don't know why NBC does this, but when you try to watch some of these different sports, you get this quad feed. Right? Where it's literally 4 camera feeds at once. And it is astronomically difficult to watch. I'm like, this is like doing a switcher, except normally I'd be selecting which camera feed I want to go big, And I don't know. It just seems like something. I know that they've had to overcome a lot of problems this year. I'm sure it's been a lot of difficulties, but it also seems like some of the protocols have really changed this year, and we've been seeing a lot of cable cameras as well. There's one.
Seems like I'm seeing more of those. Than drones, actually.
Even with the row crew or crew row, whatever. It was a very, very, very long cable cam. So, but that said, that brings up an important point that if you are flying wake surfing or wakeboarding, you are going to be limited by what you can capture if you are flying in GPS or sport mode. Attitude mode is really going to be the key to really matching the speed of the subject that you're tracking and to get those really smooth shots. So that's safety number one is attitude mode for me. And I will say, we have a class, Drone U members have actually exclusive access to this class, which is called Flight Over Water. And we go over a lot of different settings that I don't think we could actually cover in one podcast. So I'll give you one golden nugget, but I really, really, really recommend you watch that class. I mean, it's a few years old, but the information is still very relevant. And frankly, there are a lot of nuances, Rob, like even when to take off and land from a boat. There is one particular thing to do when taking off and landing from a boat to avoid IMU errors and even compass errors. But that said, in fact, that reminds me, the old Solo, they would always blame the boats and not knowing how to take off and land when people wanted to take off their solo drone from boats. That's a long time ago.
As in solo voyage.
Yeah, literally. But that said, I think the best golden nugget that we can give you, and this is also related to mapping as well. This is why I feel like having knowledge in mapping is very relevant to drone pilots as a whole, because the rules of photogrammetry really apply to sensors on the aircraft and what's possible and what's not. And I mean, you really are, in my opinion, a better pilot when you understand photogrammetry as a whole. But that said, one of the things you absolutely need to turn off is a visual positioning system, or VPS, because what happens is that when light reflects off of the water, those cameras cannot get an accurate representation of the true altitude over the water. And I have watched, Rob, even in our subject tracking class, I have watched people literally sink themselves and their drones because they had VPS on and it literally sucked them into the water and goodbye.
Yeah, and that's exactly what he's asking. Like, what do I need to know to not have that happen?
Yeah.
So that's one. But yeah, you're right. In terms of camera settings and all of that information.
Return to home settings are absolutely critical.
Right.
Watched a few people lose drones over those settings as well. But again, there's just way too much to go over in one podcast. I mean, that class I think is really, really going to help you. I didn't hold back at all. I'm not, worried about stealing jobs. There's enough to go around for everybody. And I have a skill. I'm confident in that skill. And I love to fly around wake surfing. In fact, I was actually so stoked to get back and film with Ashley Kidd out in Austin.
You're doing some more here coming up, aren't you? The Worlds again?
It's so funny. Yeah, I actually just emailed them asking them questions about that. But I hope to do that. It's not set in stone just yet, but the offer is there, and I hope it does come to fruition because I love flying action sports. It is so much fun, and it really tests your ability to fly. Now, that said, I would also recommend a drone that has a fixed lens, meaning it's a camera lens combination. When you fly some of these more advanced drones, the perspective of various lens options can make it more difficult to fly and track objects. So, because you kind of get used to one field of view and learning how to match the speed of the subject with that field of view. And by the way, in that class are exercises on how to practice this stuff, and you don't have to be out on a boat or anything to practice this stuff. So that said, if you're a Drone U member, you already have access, so woohoo. And if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, check out Props Pilot. It's our system to sequentially train pilots in multiple environments. I think you'll find it extremely useful. That said, Rob, that's pretty much all I got for this one. There are settings that are specific to certain aircraft, and there are also some settings that I would say are subjective, such as obstacle avoidance. As a whole, I do not have mine turned on ever. Because you can't trust it, especially when you're over water. So that said, I think that is a succinct answer to the question. I do really appreciate the question. If we have more questions like this, definitely send them in, askdroneu.com. And if all goes well and we don't get a shutdown here, we are planning on actually doing a subject tracking class coming up in December in Arizona. So you could join us for that, although it is very limited because you can only have so many pilots on a boat. So
True. One question. Which drone is your go-to for subject tracking of wake surfers?
I feel like there are two answers to that question.
Cool.
There is the bootstrap answer, as if I didn't have Drone U as my backup, and then there is the Drone U as my backup answer. So
Give them both.
I would argue that the Phantom 4 Pro version 1 or 2 is actually one of the best for action sports. And the reason that I bring that up is just because it does shoot 4K 60 and it doesn't crop in on the sensor when you're shooting 60 frames per second like the X7 on the Inspire 2 does. But also because you have full control of that aircraft, you've got ADI mode built in. It's really, really, really easy to control that drone. And, you know, the other thing is that it's more stable than the Mavics. A lot of people be like, well, why not the Mavics? The Mavics, there's one particular motion that if you fly this motion, you'll fully understand what I'm talking about, which is try to make a perfect orbit on the move around a boat and around the bow of the boat. The Mavic just cannot handle the articulation of the aircraft and the gimbal to give you a perfectly smooth motion. For some people, it might be smooth enough. For me, not smooth enough. The Phantom with the center of gravity where it is, with the setup the way it is, it's a much more stable aircraft, and it can also handle more adverse conditions for flight. I mean, as a whole. So,
what about the Inspire 2?
So that's what I was just going to say is my answer for bootstrapping your business, meaning, you know, you're covering the costs, you're amortizing everything, you're it, right? That's why I say the Phantom, because they're also easily replaceable. They're not super expensive. You know, you dump one of those in the water, you're $1,500. And maybe a moral obligation to try to get it out of the water. That's about it. When it comes to, you know, having Drone U as my backup and my absolute favorite aircraft for action sports, I'm definitely in the camp of the Inspire 2, even though you don't get nearly as much flight time as a Phantom. But I like the Inspire 2 because you've got that ultra wide 2.44/1. Some people call it anamorphic, not really anamorphic, but that really wide camera view. I love that. The only issue is you can only shoot 30 frames max with that, which really limits your ability to slow footage down.
Which you do a lot of.
Yes.
Yeah.
I told Ashley that what I really want to do is I want to fly an M600 around her and have 30 RX0 cameras set up as an array, shooting 960 frames a second each one, so I can do hyper slow-mo but then move around her in real time.
Can you imagine how intimidating that would be for her with that thing buzzing around her?
Not her, but other surfers for sure, but not her.
Well,
She is like brass.
nonetheless, that she's not flown with an M600 in her face either.
This is
but
true.
She also has a tremendous amount of trust for you, which takes us full circle to the trust issue. That person has to trust you.
It's so true.
That's really important.
Now, it's funny because we did do that shoot back in March and May, and I had the Inspire 2 a few inches over the water for the majority of the duration of the flight. And between Ashley ripping tricks left and right, I mean, every 30 seconds, she's got something spectacular. There were boats following us, like taking photos of the drone and her, because I mean, I'm literally a few inches off the water because I love that super low perspective because no one else can get it.
Where's that video? Can people see it? Has it been released?
It's on Instagram. She released it on all her channels. That was part of the deal. And Centurion Boats released it on their channels. So
Got it. So you can check them out there.
yeah. I mean, what we can do though is we can put those two different edits in this video. We have full authority to do that. So I'll make sure that we send them to the production team.
That'd be cool.
So you guys can kind of see some of that B-roll throughout this show. But that said, here's the thing I will warn you of. We are all kids at heart, and it is so easy to get what I call giddy. It's overly excited to the point where you're not really thinking straight. You have got to remove that emotional aspect before you fly, especially around boats and water, because while flying over water has a lot of benefits, not many obstacles, the issue is that if you actually want shots that you can sell, you're going to have to fly closer. You're going to have to fly lower, and that means that things can go bad very fast, which brings me up to, if you're not familiar with the term thumbs up buttercup, you better get used to it. And I am going to make sure that we protect that one, because every other saying that I've said on this show, someone else has decided that it was theirs, even though, yeah,
The
whatever.
important thing is people fly safe and have the tools to do so.
Yeah, and that's it, because at the end of the day, we all want to have fun and we all want to get those cool shots, and you feel like proud. You feel like a sense of accomplishment. And so, I would really recommend, I know a lot of people are like, why do you keep recommending the Phantom? Because it's still the powerhouse, guys. Because at the end of the day, if you want a scalable business where you don't incur a lot of costs, you have that low bottom line, then you got to start thinking like this. You can't pretend to be a YouTuber and buy every dang aircraft that comes out and expect it to be better when it's not. They're compartmentalized more and more and more and more. I mean, I saw someone recommend the Air 2S for action sports, and I was like, what? Like, no, it's not even safe to fly over water. Like, what a joke. And so I just want to illustrate again one more time for all of you that listen, and thank you for all of you that do listen, that look, from the bottom of my heart, ladies and gentlemen, I am trying to give you information not to provide rather instant gratification, but sustained, scalable success to provide reliable results over time. That's all.
On that bombshell.
Rob just said on that bombshell, we're out. Bye-bye.